anyways, man, I love your project, and I want to get into it. Before we do, I want to know, how did you survive the last 3.5 years? How did you get through the pandemic, and how has it changed you?
Mhm. The best we could.
That's right.
It's there were a lot of moments. I know for me, as a musician, it required just a great deal of resourcefulness and thinking out of the box. And that's actually something that David often referred to as thinking out of the box here. And we found our ways. I know I actually took part in a 75-week regular Friday broadcast with my wife from Facebook. We called it the Feel Good Friday Hour.
They
And
did.
yeah, it didn't necessarily net us any income, but it was fun to do, and a lot of people really felt good from it. They really got a lot out of it.
And it
But
kept you guys playing. That was the
that's
other thing.
right. That's the other thing for sure.
Yeah.
And then there was work. There was work in there somewhere. The first part of the pandemic was kind of tricky, and I
Yeah.
think it actually speaks directly to how we got this latest album out too. And why it took 3 years to finally get it out. But
That's right. Well, I'll just say we also did quite a few live stream performances during the pandemic as a group. We had quite a few opportunities to do that, but those were one-offs, which was really hard, but it helped us keep the group together. But the interesting thing, Joe, is quite literally days before basically the entire country shut down, we had scheduled a recording session for mid-March of 2020. And we had done a big rehearsal for that recording session. Among other things, we were going to bring back our original percussionist, Baba David Coleman, who had played with us since the beginning in the late 90s. And he'd had to retire because he'd been very sick, but we were flying him in. We were going to put him up. He was going to be part of the recording session, but we got a call right after the rehearsal. I'm driving home from rehearsal and I get a call from the owner of the studio. Hey, things are a little hairy with this virus. They're shutting down the state. I think we should cancel and do it another time. So we went from planning to record in March 2020 to having to put it on hold. By the time we were ready again, masks off and ready again to record, Baba had succumbed to horrific cancer and died. So we never got to actually do the album that we intended to do.
Wow.
This album contains much of the music that would have been on that album, plus more things that we've written and arranged since then.
And I think that's the thing. This album contains a lot of heavy things that we've all lived through. And, that's the thing that I think art does its best. And even in the world of jazz, I mean, from, John Coltrane penning Alabama to, Dizzy going over into war-torn areas and they stop conflicts. Jazz has always kind of been this universal language and light that's gotten into people, and it's done a lot of good. So when you look at the context of this album, talk to me a little bit about the message and kind of dealing with the heavy of living in this reality right now.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the thing is that we live in a society and a culture where you cannot deny, that's sort of a parenthesis to say, you cannot deny that race has played a part, or the concept of race has played a part. And one of the things that we've purported to do is to sort of bridge differences. And when me and David started this project, or I should say when David came up to me and says, hey, should we explore this? And I took my time to get into it. One of the things I think we became conscious of was how very obvious that we were coming from different places with our looking at the liturgical and sacred music of our traditions, of our respective traditions, and how that could play out to be a positive strike. So in the title of the album, Our Feet Began to Pray, inherent in that title is a wonderful story David loves to tell, but I just wanted to highlight that it talks directly about doing something about what's going on, as opposed to merely watching it, only watching it, at least being able to give an energy towards allowing things to be a part of the conversation of change, as opposed to saying, oh, well, that's the way it is, and it's probably going to stay that way, and I'm going to continue to resent it, and I'm going to continue to hate it, because that way I'm supporting my forebears. This is not that. This is, in fact, trying to carry on the work of other forebears. But I would like David to actually speak to that himself.
Well, it's nice that you'd like that.
Primo.
Yeah, no. Here's the thing. Like all the different pieces that we created are as you're sort of understanding, part of a larger puzzle, which is how can we celebrate both our commonalities and our ability to be different from one another? And then how can we come together to try to resolve some of the bigger problems in our communities and just in the world? I mean, when we recorded the album, we couldn't have imagined quite the hot mess that things would be right here in this historic moment. And yet, because that's happened so often, it's anticipated in some of our choices and some of the pieces. One of the things to understand is, as artists, as musicians, as people with a sense of history, is that we communicate with the past over and over again. One of the pieces that we composed together for this album is a piece called Retelling the Tales That Our Ancestors Told Us, which is a way of saying that over and over, every generation needs to keep those old stories alive, whether it's an origin story, whether it's a story about caution, a story about love. We're constantly retelling these stories, these parables, and finding ways to make them relevant in our own lives. The piece that is the title track of this album is a really good example of that. Our Feet Began to Pray was something that I was thinking about before the murder of George Floyd. I was already playing around with sort of a musical idea, and this idea of my feet began to pray. What does that mean? And I was really exploring it more from a historic perspective, because at that moment, we hadn't started protesting. And I was thinking about what I'd learned of Representative John Lewis and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, how both of them, after crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, spoke from their own traditions about what that meant, and they both used this phrase. John Lewis talks about an African proverb, which we don't yet know the origin of, but he cites it in his autobiography, which says, "When you pray, pray with your feet." And Heschel, who crossed the bridge with Lewis, with Dr. King, he was one of the allies, one of the white allies that was part of the movement. It was a Sabbath day when all of this took place. And people asked him why he wasn't in synagogue. And he really responded with this idea that he said, "I felt I was praying with my feet." And if it had just been there, it would be a nice historic piece. But I found myself on the front lines in the protests, and some of the other members of the group were also part of the protest. And I was thinking about this song as the protesters were being forced onto a bridge and forced by the police onto the highway. And I realized, here we are, it's happening again. These tropes, these ideas, we need to understand that ways that history repeats itself. and how we can heal and how we can bring people together and how we can use jazz to promote social justice, just the way Mingus did, just the way I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart. You'll cut that out.
Ellington. I mean, you can even just say
Ellington, right?
Ellington.
Yeah.
Ellington, Mingus,
Brubeck,
yeah, all of the great jazz artists use
Louis
jazz as
too.
social protest. You look at what Max was
Max
doing,
Roach, yeah.
or Sonny Rollins with Freedom Suite. We don't see ourselves as unique. We see ourselves as part of an ongoing jazz tradition.
Amen.
So
Hey, hey, before you continue, I just wanted to say thank you for that question because, it's very easy to find yourself skating over things. And when really we're trying to deliver a message, and it can be a little bit heavy for some folks to look at jazz and let jazz be some sort of agent for change or for consciousness about the things that are wrong and trying to figure out how to do right about them. But I also want to make comment that I really love your background. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love this kind of almost like kiddie style art, and then someone blowing over.
That's
It's cool.
I'm a visual artist as well, so that's one of my paintings.
Ah,
Wow, that's
beautiful.
great.
And
Yeah.
and I have shows around town. I do too many things, but this is
Cool.
one that's kind of a landscape of downtown Kansas City, and that character right there is an early painting I did of Miles in the middle of this kind of painted vortex. So it's kind of
It had that Milesian vibe to it, man. Yeah.
yeah. Well, look, I'm a big Miles fan. My only son, his name is Miles, so I'm in the club.
Okay.
There you go.
So
You and my wife, by the way.
so I want to, and I want to kind of piggyback off what you're saying. And I think that's the thing about what we all live through. As an artist, this is the time to shine. There were so many things. It was 1960, 1970, parts of 50. All of these decades came crashing into each other. And as artists, you all responded and you all put things out. And I find, as somebody that curates and goes through all this music to find the best hour every week, I love the fact that people are stepping out and saying, you know what? Not okay. Or this is the way that I want to put it out there. We don't need to let the headline of George Floyd that's gone in the rear view ever go away, because there was a moment and there was a notion that we all have to adhere to, because we have to do better as people to take care of each other. That's the bottom line. And that's the thing that was, I think, emblematic of so many things that happened with George Floyd. After all of those months of being in the home, everybody was like, I'm going out. I'm out. I'm going into the streets. I'm done. I can't watch this happen anymore. And at that time, things like that were happening all the time. Boom, boom, every other week. And it's like, this has got to stop. This can't be, and this isn't a war on police. This is a clarion call to humanity to take care of each other, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is about George Floyd is one of tens of thousands of individuals who have suffered under the hands of law enforcement like this, which is not to say that law enforcement is totally bad. It's just that there were incidences that had not been addressed properly and led to like systems of incompetence. And so, I mean, like, it was great that there were cameras available and some kind of leak available that we got to really see the veil unlifted at that moment. But I can tell you stories about friends of mine from way back in the day, when I grew up in a project in Hartford, Connecticut, who were talking about how the cops were like pulling them over and saying, get in the car, and bring them behind a billboard somewhere and like working them over, and like, for whatever reason, it didn't really matter what, but they were youth of color or of another income level, and they were basically taken advantage of by members of the police force. And those things had gone on for so long. And then suddenly we got a chance to see directly what happens when this is left unchecked. So, I mean, darn, I'm glad that we got a chance to speak on it. So this song will serve many purposes in that regard. And I think the ancestors who care are smiling on it. So.
For sure. So I want to know, how did you two hook up? How did this musical union happen? How are we all sitting here right now?
Well, Dr. Chevan's a hell of a guy, and we played a couple of times with each other, and we liked each other. So it kind of starts to let him let him tell.
I moved to Connecticut in the early 90s, and around 95, I think, maybe, Warren and I met up somewhere in there. We met up, and he started playing on some of my gigs. I started playing on some of his gigs, and we were just two guys playing, your basic Connecticut jazz gigs together. When one weekend, Warren had a nice stint at one of the casinos here in Connecticut, and in one of the lounges, and I tried to give myself enough time, but I showed up late to the gig. And on that particular gig, while they were waiting for me, they were playing an old gospel song, a piece by Andre Crouch called Soon and Very Soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, of course, oh, they're playing this as kind of a musical joke because I'm not there. So soon and very soon, the bass player is going to show up, So I thought, well, and I pulled out my bass out of the case, plugged into the amp, and I just started finishing. I finished the song with him because I'd done a bit of sub work in Black churches in Brooklyn, New York, where I'd been living before this. So I was familiar enough with the tune that I could find my way through the rest of it. And at the break, I said, that was fun, to Warren. And we had both been listening. You may remember this album. It was called Steal Away. It was a really cool duo album with Charlie Hayden and Hank Jones. Does that ring a bell? So we had both been talking about that album and how much it touched us and how really gorgeous it was to have, the conversation between Hank Jones and Charlie Hayden, which is some beautiful playing. And I said, well, what would happen if we took that idea and applied it to Jewish and African-American music? And well, Warren will tell you, he was not so sure that was a great idea.
I won't go into depth. I mean, you can probably look it up and find it. It's all over the place. But no, I was just saying, like, do we want to be the poster children of integration at this day and time? It's like, and I think I remarked at one point, I was so busy trying to be hip that it didn't seem to be something that I would like jive well with at that time. But I loved the music. The music was so beautiful to check out. And I was into checking out a lot of things. And it just was great to work with David on it and see what a duo could do with this material. Yeah. And we were both strong musicians with a lot of passion when we played, and some interesting results occurred. Yeah. But the rest of the story, I guess, I will leave in David's hand because it directly involves his synagogue.
Well, I mentioned something to the cantor at my synagogue that Warren and I were playing around with these ideas. And I belong to a synagogue in the New Haven area called Mishkan Israel, which is a historically famous synagogue in civil rights in this community because Dr. King spoke there, gave essentially an early draft of his I Have a Dream speech. And so every year, to honor the memory of Dr. King, the synagogue has an MLK service, which is a community-wide event. We've got imams and priests and all kinds of ministers who participate, and they invited us to come in and play. And keep in mind, Joe, that Warren and I, this was all new to us. We were used to playing in jazz clubs, in restaurants, not in a house of worship. In fact, I would joke with the rabbi, say, I'm busy praying at my house of worship on Friday night downtown. Why don't you come after services? He never thought it was that funny. But I do think that all jazz, regardless of what we do, even if it's just, cocktail lounge jazz, has a spiritual element to it.
Yeah, I mean,
So
music in general.
So we played that service, and at first, we finished the first piece, whatever it was, and it was dead silent, which of course is typical in a synagogue because it's considered disrespectful to clap during a synagogue service. And then all of a sudden the room erupted. And it just erupted. I remember that. And sort of this wave came over us. And we played and played, and then we were done. And then there was a little get together after the service, some nosh, a little something to drink. And people came up to us, and by the end of that little get together, we had 2 more gigs.
Right on. So our feet began to pray. What are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Well, I think Dr. Chevan should really assail that one as well. But
Thanks, Byrd.
I'm hoping that people will be inspired to look between the spaces of some of the complacency they may have adopted. I'm hoping that those people who have embraced that we need change continue to bolster their point of view. I'm hoping that there's some people who will be introduced to new ways of thinking about what it means to be a human being. I mean, what it means to be universal, and what does it mean to be all related? And I mean, it's very easy to create the walls and put ourselves into the boxes of groups. And there's validity in recognizing where you're coming from, but I think we really have to learn how to, how do we say, melt away the boundaries, man. And that's what I hope this song did. We have a couple of songs that directly address that. One of them is Shedding Our Color.
That's right.
My brother-in-law wrote that song, and he had written it back in 2007, but he comes to me and my wife around 2016 and says, "Hey, I got a song for you." So my wife is Dutch and Caucasian, and well, I'm African American and I'm from America. And he says, "I got a song for you, Shedding Our Color." And I looked at it. It was a little bit slow, and it was lovely. But I thought, well, I'm not sure if this is really our thing. But then I got a flash of light, and well, not really a flash of light, literally, but you know what I mean, like a eureka. And I thought, well, gee, maybe the Afro-Semitic experience can do something with something like this. And we put a little ka-chunk on it, and next thing you know, whoa, it's on the album. But it directly talks about what it means to commune in spirit, to be like brother and sister, and just loving each other as opposed to embracing the differences and just putting away the bigotry. And I know it sounds like trite as all get out when you look at it that way, but really it's the bottom line of what's going on with much of what we're addressing when we call ourselves the Afro-Semitic experience.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all different as human beings, but as Alvin Carter's father often has said when he's sat in with us in concert, we have to look at one another long enough till we can see our similarities more than our differences.
Yeah.
And I think that theme runs a lot through the music. Certainly not the title track, but the opening track of Unity in the Community is really meant to be a rally to bring people together. And again, to find the ways in which we are all common to one another, human beings, and we can celebrate that while still having, you know, our own individuality and our own beliefs and our own practices. Those can coexist.
So
And give people a nice swing beat too, you know.
Yeah.
That too.
If you can, if you can begin to love each other and have a groove under it, man, that's going to be like a great world, I think.
Amen. So it comes out today on Reckless DC Records. Where's the
Yep.
best place for people to pick this up and to find out anything about you guys?
The best place on the internet is our website, because it's the only place in the entire world where you can actually get the physical CD with the incredible artwork that was created for us by Ellis Echevarria. Really a gorgeous cover.
Yeah.
And you can also get the tracks from us. Now, if you're a streamer, you can go to streaming services, but I'm not going to name them because we get maybe like 1/100th of a penny for every play. And you know, people are welcome to listen to our music there, but if they want to support the band, if they want to get to know the band better, we invite them to come to our website.
Yes, I double that.
Perfect. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being open and candid about this project. Thank you for the project, and have a great 2024, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, same to you, man.
Yeah,
Same to
thank you
you.
so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.